is August 5th. My name is Ayman Khan. The sun is out shining and the boxing gods shine down on Terence Crawford this weekend, and the boxing public delivering what was in preparation of the event a brilliant boxing card. Did it deliver? We'll discuss everything and more on this show. But the lead question is: Are the cracks beginning to show in Terence Crawford's game now that he's jumping up the levels, jumping up the weight to 154, taking on the biggest dog in Israil Madrimov? Is the pressure starting to tell? Is he giving away too much? That is the question for Josh Hart and myself and the chat too. Of course, this is Seconds Out Live, the most interactive boxing podcast show. You can catch us on all platforms, including TikTok and Spotify. So make sure you go and download us there as well and watch in your leisure. If you can't catch up live, get your questions and comments in the chat, and also we'll get to your comments as well too. Maybe respond to a few. If you aren't watching live, we'll definitely give you a response back. But as I mentioned there in the preceding sentences, Josh Hart is with me. Not quite Danny Flexen, but the depth at Seconds Out goes deep. I'm a little bit thrown off actually. The Vinny's put me on the B side of this little equation here on the broadcast. But Josh, nonetheless, I guess you deserve it. How you doing?
I'm very good, Ayman. Very happy to be on the A side of this side of the picture as well. Just shows the levels that we're going through here as we keep grinding, grafting every day. But I'm very good, Ayman. How's everything with you?
Yeah, good. We've also cracked the 800,000 mark, so a lot of good work going on behind the scenes. We want to thank each and every one of you for helping us get to that point. The road to 900k does begin as well too. So once again, thank you to everyone. Let's get to some of the quick comments in the chat first of all here. Cracks clickbait. Well, we'll get into that. Zenith says it's not clickbait. Well, Zenith, already the conversation and the discussion is happening. Glad you don't have Danny Flexen doing this live. We're glad for a little bit of a break for Danny Flexen. just kidding. I'm sure you'll be back again next week. One of the worst interviews I've seen who asks people disrespectful questions. I think you're being a little bit harsh there too. Danny's a big boy. He can respond to that himself. But you don't have to like everyone. You don't have to like me or Josh. We have some good, respectful conversation here too. But Danny is very much well established and well esteemed within the industry. I appreciate working with Danny. Not clickbait, we agree. Crawford needs to avoid Boots and Canelo. Well, we'll get into that shortly too. Boots beats Crawford right now. Simple question: are cracks starting to show? In my opinion, the answer is no. Who fights like Madrimov in the US? Stars make fights. I do believe the fight humbled him a little bit. Well, I've got a question for you guys in the chat as we give you our breakdown of the fight. First of all, I want to ask, in the wake of Terence Crawford defeating Israil Madrimov, what is Terence Crawford's next move? Should he stay at super welterweight 154? Should he move back down to welterweight 147? Should he move to middleweight 160? Or is he going to make that big jump up to 167 and chase that Canelo Alvarez fight? Let me get your thoughts in the chat as well too, and talk about as well. You mentioned maybe a fight or two you'd want to see at the weight that you're picking. Josh, let's get into it then. What did you see of Terence Crawford's big win over Israil Madrimov this weekend?
I thought Crawford obviously didn't look as good as what he did against Errol Spence, but I think that performance against Errol Spence was a once-in-a-lifetime type of performance. Obviously, I know a lot of people online have been giving him stick. One thing I said to you before we went live, Ayman, was that the interest for the fight between Crawford and Canelo seemed to have died down massively from before the fight, due to, I guess you could say, Crawford at times struggling against Madrimov, which I don't know if people are going to agree, but I expected that to happen. I thought Madrimov was going to be up there as one of Crawford's toughest fights. And overall, I still thought he looked very good. I thought he just about nicked it. I think 115, 113 is the right scorecard. I think you could have given that either way and there wouldn't have been many complaints. But I've been seeing a lot of people online, some people saying, Madrimov was robbed. I don't think robbery is the right way to describe it. I think when you talk about robbery, you talk about something where it was a completely one-sided fight and it's gone the complete other way, but it was not like that at all. Some people have been saying that they believe Crawford won it, 9 rounds to 3. I can't see that. I think 7 rounds to 5 either way was the right scorecard. Don't get me wrong, there were times where Crawford did obviously, look good, was doing his thing. Obviously, I wasn't able to watch it live due to my body deciding to fall asleep on me. So I was there on my sofa during the whole fight, but I caught up on it. But yeah, I think people need to possibly die down with the talk of Canelo for now. I think some people saying that it's going to be a good fight and a good stylistic matchup. I don't think so. I think we saw at the weekend with the performance against Madrimov that 154 could possibly be Crawford's limit, possibly 160, but I think 168 is a big step too far for Terence Crawford.
Appreciate that breakdown, Josh. And as is the lead here, are the cracks beginning to show? And I'm offering that because it is a question. It's not a statement from myself. But when I watched the fight back, I kind of thought, this isn't the Terence Crawford that I'm used to watching. This isn't the Terence Crawford who's been demolishing opponents in front of him. His last recent streak of fights there, the likes of Jeff Horn, Kell Brook, Amir Khan, Kavalauskas, Sean Porter when he stepped on the gas. Avanesian looked brilliant against Avanesian. Errol Spence Jr., say what you want about Errol Spence Jr. in the car crash, but he fought what was in front of him. And those are two what was deemed to be elite fighters. There, one of the options is, and my over there, 168 as opposed to 167. Vinny, if you could give that a quick little edit there as I interrupt myself. But yeah, you didn't see a destructive Terence Crawford. You had to see one who, some of the hallmarks of his game as well too. The whole concept of him, and I hate the cliche, but I'm going to say it here too. Big, he's a high level thinking fighter, a fighter with great boxing IQ. Never really downloaded the data on his opponent. Never really got the gauge of Israil Madrimov as he has done of previous fighters, and that was to the credit of Israil Madrimov, who never really had that breakout moment, a breakout fight. He never really had, a couple of fights. There was a couple of fighters' names you really want on his CV to kind of give the full backing to Madrimov, but really showed a good level of himself. But Crawford wasn't able to do that with Madrimov until later on in the fight, and that's because when you look to step up the levels, the trade-off is the punch resistance that you're giving away, the punch power that you're giving away, the weight that you're giving away. And that means a fighter like Crawford has to fight within himself to get the victory because he's hesitant of what's coming back. A couple of times he got caught with that big looping, unpredictable overhand right from Madrimov. And he was lucky in there, to be fair, to not get caught flush with one of those shots, because that would have been a real interesting sight if Terence Crawford didn't quite have his defensive nous at the highest level on fight night, because it could have been one of those moments where we wouldn't be debating a knockdown in Crawford's career. We'd be seeing a clear knockdown in Crawford's career. And for me, I feel like as Crawford, if he looks to continue to climb up the weights, if he has a stopgap at middleweight or even goes up to 168 and fights Canelo Alvarez, you're going to see those parts of his game exposed, and you're going to see a fighter who looks not as good of a fighter as he has done because he's giving so much away. And regardless of what you say about Canelo Alvarez and his level, maybe he's slipping or on the decline, which he probably is, he's still at the top, at minimum, he's still at the very top level of being a world-class fighter, or maybe even still at a bottom-end elite fighter, if you really kind of want to break down those terms there. And I'm not so sure that I've got the appetite off the back of how it was a difficult process to defeat Madrimov for Crawford, that I want to see that fight, especially when you throw in the bigger context of the weight being thrown in. But that's what I saw from the weekend. It was a great victory. That aside from Terence Crawford, he earned the victory and he did win for me in a close fight there. But it could have been a little bit of a project that could have ended up went up in smoke for him, but he did avoid that with his great boxing ability. Let's get into some of the conversation and the chat in the chat box. So we have here we go. I'm just scrolling up here. Boots is nice. We had that one already. Crawford needs to keep ducking Boots. One from Joseph Caruana. Doesn't want to see Crawford versus Boots. Good fight there. You just don't know whether that fight would happen at welterweight or maybe Boots might chase him up to 154 as Crawford looks to establish himself now. Good fights though there at 154 for him if he does decide to stay there. That's not integrity. That's just asking ridiculous questions. Keggy's still pushing on with that. It would be good if you join us in the Crawford discourse as well, to the Keggy. Thunder Road, a good appearance from Thunder Road, striking down in the track, striking down some of the conversation. Appreciate Thunder Road in here. Click the like button, as he usually says. I'll say it for him. Don't you worry. Common W for Josh. Josh, you racking up the W's like Terence Crawford?
Fingers crossed. I mean, I'm getting back in the boxing ring in November, so hopefully I can get a W this time. As we all know what happened last time. I think my first live for Seconds Out, I was fresh off the back of a robbery. Some saying almost as bad as some of the biggest robberies in boxing history. So hopefully, while racking up the W's in the chat, hopefully we can rack one up in the ring at the back end of the year as well.
Errol stood in the ring, told Boots he would fight him at 154. So if you don't fight him, is he a duck? Good question there. Want to see what the people in the chat say about the potential of Errol Spence versus Jaron Boots Ennis at 154. I don't know if we will end up seeing Errol Boots in the ring at all, to be honest with you. Especially off a major eye surgery, which would be concerning for Errol. Errol's a warrior and he's always kind of stood on business, as the Americans like to say. But I just wonder if his business in the ring has been conducted for him now. DB Cooper One, good to see you in the chat. DB Cooper One, I see Al Ayman Khan is back from his Tinder date with Ben Shalom at the Shard. I heard the Boxer Company card got declined. I never saw any transactions taking place with the Boxer Company card, so I can't confirm or deny that was the case. But it was a good conversation with Ben Shalom and others at the Shard there. A media lunch was put on, and I was sent there to go do the business for stand on business for Seconds Out. So I hope you enjoyed the interviews there. Good to get time with Ben Shalom in amongst all the other outlets as well. And Caroline Dubois as well, too. Always a good conversation with Caroline Dubois, getting to know a little bit about her and her enjoyment of reading and also reading the ring and the room and her opponents to get the victories as well. I thought she might end up stopping Moneo over the weekend, but she got the knockdown and got the victory, was the most important thing. Thunder Road says, does Josh Hart have ADHD? Can't keep still. Rocking back and forth. Is he the Joe Laws of Seconds Out? Are you the Joe Laws of Seconds Out?
Honestly, I don't really know how to respond to that. I didn't realise I rock on my chair. But now it's been pointed out, I'm going to sit deathly still for the rest of this live because I've been caught out apparently by Thunder Road. So nice one, Thunder Road.
He might not be the Joe Laws of Seconds Out, but he's definitely deliver out some boxing justice in the chat. The banhammer might come out from Josh, who I've heard has got a mean right hand. We haven't sparred just yet, but maybe he's ducking. Don't know what weight he's at, but I'll promise to go light on him. I don't want to see Errol get brain damage. Errol is done. There you go. There's leading off of the conversation I was saying there earlier, the possibility of Errol Spence Jr. return to the ring or not. That's still very much up in the air. DF, I don't know how B's is that. Josh Oil up in 4K. Will be Seconds Out Live has definitely got we allow a lot of things to happen on the camera or in the chat, but Oil Up isn't going to be one of them.
That's insane. That is an insane statement to put on a boxing talk show. I'm not a fan of that comment personally.
I like you, Capote, Truman Capote. I think that's these glasses. Someone said I look better with the glasses off. I'm not a big fan of that, though. And I obviously can't see either or as well either. So I'd like to keep the glasses firmly on my face. Super middleweight is 168. Yep, absolutely. But just slipped the finger on the 7 as opposed to the 8. It's back up there now. So that's how amended. So make sure you get your poll votes in. The Keggy. Madrimov is very limited. Nothing special. I think he's a good fighter. And I remember back in the day when I was... And I get it. Look, it's promotional talk, it's promotional speech and things. But when I asked Eddie Hearn who's going to be the breakout star from his stable in 2024 for this decade, he picked Israil Madrimov. That was some big talk there. I think for the most part, I think he's got a good skill set within him. I just maybe think he might feel a little bit. He did tire towards the end of the fight, but maybe if he went a little bit earlier, throw a little bit more caution to the wind, a close fight on those cards, he probably would be kicking himself that he didn't start a little bit earlier. Madrimov, here we go. DB Cooper 1 is a serious operator. Such a shame that young fans are narrow-minded. Can't comprehend a 10-fight world champion being a worthy opponent. Crawford had nothing to gain. KG 115, 113 was fair. I had it a draw. See, well, Madrimov was very limited, but then you got him having the draw there, KG. Good attention to detail. 167. Yep. Appreciate it, Thunder Road. But Antonio, thank you for joining. Antonio Bud clearly won 8-4 at worst. Presentation of card was terrible. KG, I heard quite a few fans kind of speaking on the pacing of a show and what was a long show. I wonder if you felt the pacing as well too was a little bit off also. I think they're trying a few different things. It's reminiscent of the Triller kind of cards when Triller were doing like entertainment and boxing. Do you feel like they've got it right? Do you feel it's the right mix right now? What would you like to see, less or no? Chandler's been straight hating on Bud since the fight. It's stupid. Not quite. We don't take any sides here. Seconds out, we just get the thoughts and opinions of fighters that we interview. There's no personal standpoint on Bud and his victory over the weekend, just conversation. Sony's a horrible broad company, shocking presentation and production values, scheduling of whole program. Jeff Horn, Brooke Khan, Spence were all washed. Anyway, is Ayman Khan taking over YouTube boxing? I'm definitely not. No, look, I mean, you're not wrong with Jeff Horn, Kell Brook, and Khan. They definitely weren't at the peak of their powers at all. And Errol Spence, look, car crash for sure. You got to contextualize that a little bit, but undefeated and ready to take on that challenge. We can't really call Errol Spence washed, especially off of he came back of the car crash and fought Danny Garcia and beat Danny Garcia. And for me, Danny Garcia is a world class operator, even though he is at least in the latter half of his career, he was a lot more one-dimensional, as the years went on. Still a very good fighter, still a very capable fighter. I don't think you can discredit and call Errol Spence washed at that point. And we don't truly know the effects of the car crash because we haven't seen Errol Spence enough. But take your point on Horn, Brook, and Khan, and think Errol Spence was Terence Crawford was definitely padding out his record. So the question remains anyway, to what Terence Crawford's next move will be. Josh, what do you think he'll do? Do you think he'll collect the belts at 154? What move do you think he'll look to make?
I've got a feeling that Canelo's still going to be next. I think with the influence of His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh, we know what he wants, and he wants to make Canelo versus Crawford. And normally when there's something that he wants, there's a running theme that he tends to get it because a lot of money gets shown at the end of the day. Boxing is a business. And I think Crawford's getting to that stage of his career now where, there's not, he's definitely towards the back end rather than towards the early stage of his career. He's already a 2-weight undisputed world champion, a 4-weight world champion. I wouldn't be shocked to see the Canelo fight get made next. But if not, I can't see him going to 160. I think he'll just stay at 54. I don't see him going back down. I think he's done everything that needs to be done down at 147. So I think either he'll stick at 154 or Canelo. And if I was going to hedge my bets on either one of them to be more likely, I'd genuinely say there's probably more of a chance that he faces Canelo next. That's just how I see it.
Let me just play with 154 for a moment, Josh, and let me throw some names at you. Of the names I'm about to throw at you, which of these would you like to see? The winner of Virgil Ortiz versus Sergey Boychuk in with Terence Crawford, Sebastian Fundora in with Terence Crawford, Bakram Murtazaliev in with Terence Crawford, or any other name at 154. Josh Kelly with British interest was floating around there now. I think he's moved up to middleweight to fight on against Liam Smith. But any of the other names or contenders at 154, Erickson Lubin is around there. Xander Zayas is there. Who do you want to see in with Terence Crawford next if he stays at 154?
I like the look of Fundora. Fundora's always been an interesting fighter for me to watch, just based on the fact that he's such a unique fighter in terms of the way he's built, but the way he's fighting at, or the weight he's fighting at. I mean, we saw the issues that he caused for Tim Tszyu. Obviously, I know there was a big cut there that affected the fight, but he still did enough to get the victory. And I know there was the talk of Fundora versus Spence, but we've not seen a lot of where that's really going. I don't really think we'll see Spence in the ring for a while if he is to get back in the ring still. But out of all those names you have mentioned, either Virgil Ortiz Jr., again, I think that would be a very interesting fight. We've seen how good Virgil Ortiz Jr. can be. But Fundora, I think it would just be an interesting fight. And I'd be interested to see the way how Crawford gets around that really long build that he's got and that long reach that he has.
I agree with you. I think the most exciting fight at that weight for Terence Crawford definitely stands to be Sebastian Fundora, because he's not a puzzle. He's not anything he really needs to figure out in that sort of sense. He has to get over the natural physical attributes of Vendora, who throws hell for leather and looks for the knockout as well too. And Budder will looking to set up that knockout and counter off of him all night long. So it's definitely will likely lend itself to be an action-packed full fight there. As would Virgil Ortiz Jr. too as well, who think he'd have something to prove as well with his first big chance at a huge name on his resume, lending itself to be another all-action type of affair as well. So I think those two are the names you'd kind of look to pitch yourself at 154 if Terence Crawford does indeed look to stay. But let's move on to that next topic, and you've talked about it here, and the title, of course, is called. I've set this up. I tried to make sure my puns or my little captions were on the level of Danny Flexen's. I don't think I quite got it, but You Want Payday is the next one, of course, harkening back to one of Canelo's infamous moments, looking like a true boss with his interaction and altercation with Demetrius Andrade. So You Want Payday? That's most that with the rumors and the Saudi influence and the Saudis kind of saying that they've made an offer now to Canelo Alvarez, a big offer, one that with the names of the likes of David Benavidez and others, in really kind of not in contemplation. You looking for that next big kind of fight poster, that fight day, that fight night, and the one big fight in which has real kind of pound for pound ramifications, and one big fight that I think boxing fans and would seep over to boxing audiences and gets boxing fans talking is this pound for pound showdown between Terence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez. But Canelo's also kind of put the kibosh on that. He said, "Look, what do I look to gain from that fight? I'm giving up loads of weight. It doesn't do anything for me. You won't give me the credit for beating Crawford because I'm still very good. I weigh more than him. I'm allowed to weigh more than him because I've done so much in my career. I can call these shots. So if I call my shots and choose my shots where I'll pick my shots where I want them, and this is the fight, and this is how I want the fight, and this is the way I want the fight, and then I go beat Crawford, I go knock him out or stop him like I have done, even though that's been not as Canelo hasn't done that as much in his last few fights. If he ends up doing that, you won't give me the credit that I deserve for fighting him. And I completely get that point of view. Whether the Saudis can offer enough money to Canelo Alvarez to kind of make him change his mind on that point of view, and maybe the money will outweigh the lack of credit because the credit in the bank balance will be so high, is another thing that might be more likely. But when it comes down to it, Josh, how much of a shot would you give Terence Crawford over Canelo? Do you feel that Terence Crawford's IQ, his skill, can kind of carry himself, and his own natural frame? He's a big, tall guy as well, too tall for the weight at 147 and 154. Is it at a good weight? Do you think it can carry through to 168? And do you think he can, really upset the odds as it would be against Canelo Alvarez?
I don't think so. I don't think he has a chance against Canelo. Definitely, Crawford's no bum. He's one of the best fighters in the world. But I think going to 168 is that step too far. I think we all kind of got a bit brought back down to reality, I guess you could say. Obviously, all the talk before the Madrimov fight was, oh, it's going to be Canelo next. I don't think there was a lot of talk on Madrimov at all, really, when you talk to people about it. A lot of it was saying, Crawford wins this, it'll be on to Canelo. And don't get me wrong, if he put in a statement performance against Madrimov and looked just as good as what he did against Errol Spence last year, we could be sat here right now and having a completely different conversation about Canelo versus Crawford. But from what I saw, from what I've seen from Canelo, I know a lot of people have been saying Canelo's looking a little bit on the slide in his last few fights. But I don't really see Crawford causing a lot of trouble to Canelo. I think Canelo's just that bit too big. Possibly maybe a little bit too smart. I don't think the power that Crawford has does carry through to 168 as well as it has at other weights. I just think Canelo, I'm not saying it's an easy fight for Canelo at all, but I can't see Crawford having a lot of success in that fight, if that's me being truly honest.
Let's jump back to some of the comments in the chat, see what the barometer is there, the gauge from everyone in there. Cider cards are way too long, even for a weekend. An 8-hour card is ridiculous. Not good for viewers or those in attendance, and don't need an M&M show when the card is stacked. Yeah, it can verge onto real kind of painful, almost painful viewing when you're trying to hold on to watch kind of everything cover kind of. I tried so hard to stay on. I ended up falling asleep. I missed. I think I caught the end of Bakole Anderson, and then that was it. Good night for me, as it was for Jared Anderson there. Bud looked to struggle a bit with Madrimov's feints. Canelo is also very good at feinting, carries more power. I agree with that. I think he's kind of slowed down on the feinting and he's become a lot more kind of rudimentary with his game. And what Canelo is looking to do is really kind of set up those power punches. But you just wonder if maybe he's just kind of held that back a bit and can roll back the years slightly. I hate using that cliche and phrase, especially for someone like Canelo, but you just wonder if maybe that real kind of full reflection of Canelo's prime, he's maybe still got the ace up his sleeve and can pull that out for one last big fight against Crawford potentially. 60 watching, no flexing, but don't forget to hit the thumbs up. That's the reason to hit the thumbs up there, Thunder Road. Punch resistance, Howin, the only person that appeared hurt in the fight was Madrimov. Kavaliauskas hurt Bud way more than Madrimov. That's the point that I'm saying there, though. Is like you had that small little crack against Kavaliauskas, but now you're giving away the punch resistance. So naturally, you're going to get hurt more by giving away that weight. That's the point I'm making. That when it comes to 168, you're giving up way too much weight. And for someone who's shown a good chin, apart from that Kavaliauskas fight where he got caught, and it's kind of like, did he, didn't he? And Crawford's kind of admitted, you know what, so what if I did? He didn't flat out deny that it ever happened. He just kind of accepted it for what it is and said, look, who cares if I did or didn't? I still did what I did and ended up finishing the fight there. But the point is, when you go up to 168, you're not going to be talking about, look what I did after the fact. You're going to be getting clocked and having to deal with that weight that you've given away there. The worst moment was Turkey awarding himself a Boxing Hall of Fame award. That was embarrassing. Haven't actually seen that moment. Haven't been able to go back to the card, and because, like I mentioned to you, I fell asleep at that point, so I skipped through to the main fight. So I have to catch up back and give my opinion at another point. Styles make fights. He fought a mover whose entire game plan was to stay patient and move. Crawford will get done by Canelo. William Ainsley is going for the Canelo win. Are Josh Hart and Ayman Khan the best double act in YouTube boxing? Coogan has to be worried. Thoughts? Gary, don't know about the best double act in all of boxing, but I'm glad you think of us in such high esteem. All those two, well, don't know. Well, I'll leave that comment alone. Django Goat X. I think Boots beats Errol easy. Hopefully we get to see that fight happen. Ralph Blue. If Crawford feels he can fight at 168, then he should take the Canelo fight. It would make good business sense, and the public, including me, would like to see that. One vote in the column for Canelo versus Crawford for Jack Dutton. Boots can beat Crawford as well. Good fight there. I think Crawford's right in saying that Boots probably needs a couple of fights on his resume too. Someone needs to have an honest chat with Turk and explain to him how he's coming across sometimes the Western audience. Boxing Hall of Fame was a step too far, says the Keggy. Derek Chambers coming to the defense of Josh Hart. Oh, leave Josh Hart alone. We'll do our best to give Josh an easier ride than he has been. YC, the way he performed at 154, man, Prime Pack would have killed Crawford. Well, Pacquiao might be coming back as well, too. I know he had less than stellar outing over in, I think, Japan it was, but apparently Ryan Garcia might be having one with him, or Conor Benn is someone as well who wants a slice of Manny Pacquiao. For those in the UK, do you recognize the green yellow emblem on the top of Josh's bookcase? Looks like a yellow dog. Football related. Is it football related, Josh?
No, it's actually like a little like cricket ball foam hand. I went to a little cricket game in Nottingham. This was when I was like, I want to say 12, 13 years old. It was when I finished year 8, so not actually that long ago in the grand scheme of things. But no, it's not football related. It's from my local cricket team, even though I'm not actually much of a cricket fan. But it just has a nice place up there.
Back when you were 12 or 13 years old, wasn't that a couple of weeks ago?
Oh, there's no need for that, Ayman. Come on now. I know I'm a young man, but that's a bit of a stretch.
Fair enough. Going back to the chat there. Also, that arena was not sold out, as they kept stating. Weren't there in attendance, but I know a few people that was. I'll ask them there. A lot of tends to happen is a lot of comps there too, so you don't know if they were actually the tickets were sold as opposed to given away to seat fillers. And those type of apps there are available over in the UK. You can get a cheap discounted seat there, but I'll have to ask a few that were present at the fight as to whether it was fully sold out, or at least the bums were on seats in some form on the night. Josh Hart has a place in my heart. Fair play to Derek. Ralph Blue, Ayman, you look like David Hay. If the camera could just pan in on me a little bit, Vinny, do your job, and do your best here to give me the one screen, so you can get a good look at me. Does this guy here look like David Hay? Gotta give you a little look here. I'll give you a look there. I don't see it. I think David Hay is, unfortunately, he loses on the looks challenge with myself. His boxing might just be a little bit better, and might fall short on talking as well too. But that's where the similarities start and end for me and David Hay. Eddie Hearn was throwing his toys at the pram, claiming the scorecards were a disgrace. He needs to sit down, talks, acts like a politician. This is where DB Cooper, I was kind of thinking it makes good matchmaking sense for that fight because it was a close fight and Madrimov was able to showcase his skills to a degree and showcase how good of a fight it was. It was a bit of a win-win situation for Madrimov and his team and for Eddie Hearn, because now he's had that big fight against a pound-for-pound recognized star. People have seen that he's a good fighter. In theory, they should kind of come on to some degree to his next fight and watch him and see how he performs later on. So you've given Madrimov his breakthrough without giving him his breakthrough win. And Eddie can then kind of say, like you're saying there, he can throw his toys at the prime and say that he should have won. So that Eddie can claim on his next fight, the man who beat Terence Crawford but was robbed of the victory. That's the line that they can sell Madrimov on, because to an American audience, it's a bit difficult. It takes someone like a Triple G and that sort of type of fighter to really kind of resonate and translate over to audiences outside of their native country. Madrimov isn't quite that, but although he does reflect some of Triple G's attributes, he doesn't create the storm like Triple G has. But with little bits like this, and with a promoter like Eddie Hearn throwing his toys out and being exaggerating to that level, you kind of add a bit more to Madrimov's promotional game there for his next fights and in the future. Too many fans expected a Spence type of dominance on Saturday. Higher weight class, 1 year plus layoff for a fighter. That timing is crucial. An opponent with skills, regardless of his pro record. Warrior, 84-ish. I think that's a really good assessment. To be fair, good to see you in the chat. YC, if Danny Garcia fought like Canelo, he would have been effective. If Virgil Ortiz looks great at the weekend, I want to see Ortiz versus Bud, and I pick Ortiz in that fight. Always wonder in the back of the mind about the rhabdomyosis that Virgil Ortiz has suffered in the past, kept him out of fights as well too. It's never fully shown itself in fights so far, but you just wonder on that one big night, one big occasion, might that play a factor in the fight? You hope not, because Ortiz is a wicked, wicked fighter. Crawford versus Virgil Ortiz is next, lads, says Gary. Gary must be the bookmaker or the matchmaker. That's a tough opponent on paper for Ortiz, by the way. I agree with you too. A fighter like Brandon Adams, though, was able to expose Bohachuk's game to a degree. And Brandon Adams was a real good fighter. I remember him on the reboot of The Contender. I remember him against Charlo. And whilst he didn't win the fight in spits and spats of that fight, he made Charlo look very ordinary. And I was always wondering if Brandon Adams might be that type of fighter who matchmakers, when matchmaking their prospects on the way through and they get into that contenderous type of level and they picked someone like Brandon Adams, who's a bit of a mover and has got a good skill set, might they come a cropper biting off a little bit more than they could chew, because Adams is a very, very capable fighter. Madrimov is the best fighter, 154. I knew that would be a tough fight for Bud. All the greats were once in fights where the opponent's style was unsuited to theirs, gave them problems. Fair play for that comment, Timothy. Bud, my guy, but he could lose to Virgil Ortiz if they fight. Jack Dutton, if Bud fights Canelo, it'll not be for the undisputed title because the IBF has stripped Canelo. That will take the lust off the fight for me. I still think it would be a grand. Actually, no, forget me on this point. Josh, you can come on this one. If Bud fights Canelo, not before the undisputed title because the IBF has stripped Canelo, would that take the luster off the fight for you, Josh?
No, not really. When you look at it away from the belts and look at what they've both done in their careers, it's one of those fights that before the influence of Turki Al-Sheikh, you would have said it's a fantasy fight, but these types of fantasy fights are getting made now, and this is exactly that. It's a fantasy fight that we are very close to seeing. I think no matter what this fight is still going to have world titles on the line. You could make this fight with no titles for me, and it would still be interesting. People would still talk about it simply because of how dominant both fighters have been at their respective weight classes. I think it would be even bigger if they could meet in the middle, let's say 160, but I don't think Canelo can make 160 anymore. I mean, he might be able to, I'm not sure. But, just because they've lost the IBF title, I don't think that takes anything off the fight. I think the fight is as big as it is, whether it was for undisputed or for just one of the world titles. I think it's still a massive fight.
Let's jump to some of these comments. Can't get to them all because we've got to move on to our next point, but I will just jump in on some of Cloud Cafe's comments. Madrimov's team's game plan was perfect. Crawford didn't take or make Madrimov go to plan B, so I understand why people are giving huge props to Madrimov. After saying that, Crawford was barely in range of Madrimov, making Madrimov not feel like he needed to adjust. So his southpaw stance was critical, but being a southpaw made Madrimov use a right straight without jabs, but purely timing. Shout out to Seconds Out. Remember when you all were just starting with Radio Raheem? Congrats for making this far. Yeah, 800k. We broke that barrier. Going a long time, even further back than Radio Raheem. A lot of good people put the foundations in there as well, including Raheem too. Don't want to discredit his work, but a lot more people came before him and have come after as well too to help get Seconds Out to where it is so far. And we need all the help we can get, which is why we're thankful of you guys jumping in on the chat. DB Cooper 1 says Canelo will price himself out, hence why Turkey isn't begging for him and managing expectations with other fights. You do wonder as well too if it's a little bit tactical as to why the UFC are going head to head with Canelo versus Berlanga. This is the Riyadh season Saudi card that's happening in the Sphere with Turkey Al Sheikh and Dana White going head to head with Canelo versus Berlanga. Is it a little bit of a, well, if you can't, will Canelo be put in the point where it's like, if you can't beat him, join him? Will he be shown what type of event? Will he be shown what type of fight night they can create and what kind of buzz they can create in spite of what you're doing as well? So you just wonder if that's a little bit of play behind the scenes. No need for that. That's uncalled for. I can't remember what that was. I think it was the joke regarding Josh Hart being a young'un. I do want to see Crawford versus Boots. Beasting says he will lose to Charlo. Boots struggled with a guy who had less than a month to prepare. That's from Shoto Bofin. David Abanisian is a good fighter with 4 weeks, 6 weeks to prepare. Other fighters have tried those sort of games, and Abanisian is someone who's always pretty much ready and about fight weight to get into the ring. Yes, he didn't quite have a full camp. And yes, he did shift a few shots that maybe he shouldn't have done. But I think that was in light of Boots kind of saying, I've got the beating of this guy and I'm happy to kind of shift this to open up this opportunity. Madrimov gave Bivol hell. Charlo is one-dimensional like EJ. And then Madrimov wasn't close to being best at 154 based on what? A semi-decent win over Kurbanov, Fandora, Zhu, and of course, Charlo, when he comes back, are way ahead based on resumes. Just want to shout out to Nonya here, who is being less than nice in the chat. Look, those words like that don't quite affect me, and trolls like that, you have to do a lot better to troll myself there too. But what that will get you is a hide user on this channel. But actually, we'll time you out first. We'll give you an opportunity to amend your ways. But yeah, that sort of conversation or chat won't be tolerated in this chat. Let's move on to, anyways, we had Canelo versus Crawford talked about. We've discussed that now. But what about an announcement on the US scene there for Martin Bakole in against Jared Big Baby Anderson? And Bakole dropped the Big Baby a couple of times, I think, on the way to eventually stopping him. It was a hellacious uppercut on the way as well there too for Jared Anderson. And Anderson was one of these fighters where, let me set this up for you, Josh, when you give us your thoughts on this. I know that Tyson Fury kind of says a lot, and sometimes some of his words and sometimes some of the conversation that he creates or the buzz or maybe the little pats on the back he gives to other fighters can get lost in some of the wild comments that he says. But when someone like Fury kind of says, and maybe as well, he's given a bit of a pat on the back to Bob Arum and helping him promote his fight when he's featured on those top ranked cards. But he was saying he gets all these fighters in for sparring, and he spars someone like Jared Anderson, and he says this guy is the future of the heavyweight division. This guy is going to be big. And your ears have to prick up when someone like Tyson Fury is saying that. But Jared Anderson has faltered now this weekend against Martin Bakole. He, of course, as well, we've been talking about weights. He was given some 20 or 30 pounds away, moved to Sugar Hill Steward, working with Tyson Fury, of course, as well, too. And you would have thought maybe, and I was kind of looking at this and thinking, can Jared Anderson replicate what Michael Hunter did? Move a lot, move a lot, move a lot to kind of keep Bakole moving and circling around and not set so he can't land those big punches. And Anderson was doing some okay work as he was looking to get his offense off, but Bakole for me looked like someone who knew what type of fighter he was, experienced, had those fights, had those ups and those downs, and knew where his strengths and weaknesses lie. And to not throw too much, not throw as much as he used to. The output is kind of shortened, so he's more meaningful with his shots, more accurate with his shots, and his punch selection was good. And he was able to find that punch selection to really kind of hurt and damage Jared Anderson there, who now has to go back to the drawing board if he is going to fulfill some of the potential that people say about him over in the US and from the heavyweights who have sparred him or have been in the ring with him. Were you expecting to see Anderson come through with the victory, or was this one that you thought Bakole was going to steamroll through like he did, Josh?
In the build up to it, I was thinking this kind of does seem like it's Anderson's time, a statement victory. But then when I was talking to some of my mates about it, they were saying no, like Bakole's going to beat him, and I was like, I don't really know if I can see it. But when they both got in the ring, I thought Anderson was doing well in the first round until he got dropped, and I think after he got dropped, he kind of just never fully seemed to recover. He couldn't seem to fully stay out of the way of Bakole. But what a statement that was for Bakole, you know. He's gone out there and made the future of the heavyweight division supposedly not look great. I think the game plan that he had was perfect. I think he used his size perfectly. And that puts Bakole right in the mix now. As for Jared Anderson, I think this loss, and some people might agree with me on this, some people might not. I think this loss will be one of his biggest blessings as he moves forward. I think one of the things that we've seen is I've not always been sure on Jared Anderson's mindset and his mentality. You know, we've seen that video with Roy Jones Jr. where he was talking about pressure, and you can see him in tears about it at times, saying that he's only young, he's only 23 at the time. And something about that just never, and I was never fully set on it after seeing that. I was kind of like, you know, there'd been talks of him saying that, you know, he feels a bit burnt out. He doesn't, you know, it almost seemed like he was a bit bored. And I think that fight, if he'd won that fight, I think, don't get me wrong, I think he would have found a lot of love with the sport again because he would have seen so many opportunities come his way. But I think this defeat will take a lot of eyes off him for a little bit. And I think that pressure that he feels will be off his shoulders. I think he'll go back to the gym, get working again ahead of his next fight. And I think we could see, I'm not saying a different Jared Anderson, but a much happier and a much more version of him. They'll be enjoying it a lot more because I felt like with him, he almost felt like he was just doing it as a chore and that he had to do it. Whereas now that he gets to step back for a little bit, the eyes are going to go away from him. This could be his biggest blessing for him. That's how I see it.
DB Cooper One has highlighted here. Wow, that Bakole versus Anderson fight was a great watch. Anderson pissed his own future away. Only the Yanks thought Anderson would win. Just on that, for some of the out the ring antics, and you touched upon it with the conversation with Roy Jones Jr. Not antics in the way he reacted, because you know you can react the way you want, and if you're honest in your action, fair play to you. That's not to discredit him. You know, kind of becoming emotional in his responses to what Roy Jones Jr. was saying about pressure, but the kind of when you hear the stories of him being involved in high speed car chases and things of that nature, you really kind of worry as to what his focus is and what is hindering him outside the ring to set up the success inside the ring. Do you worry in that sort of sense when you feel like this could be a blessing for him, how he might deal with this loss, Josh?
It depends on the people he's got around him, I think. At the end of the day, you'll see him come back stronger if he has a good team of people around him who are going to keep him away from getting into things like that. So I know we've seen that before. I was thinking more just boxing wise and being in the ring. I think now that he has had that defeat and he'll learn a lot from that loss. But in the time that he takes away from the gym for let's say the next week or so or the next couple of weeks, He seems like he's a bit of a family man. One of the first things that he said when they gave him the opportunity to talk after the fight was that he just wants to get home to his daughter. Um, so hopefully he can stay out of trouble and not let the loss eat him too much, where we do see him do these daft things like getting in these high-speed chases and everything. Um, but in terms of his life in boxing and what he's doing in the gym and in the ring, I still feel this loss will do a lot for him if he stays out of trouble outside the ring and just stays disciplined and not getting himself involved in anything like what he has been.
Might that be a good move then for him? Because Sugar Hill is a former cop, I believe. So maybe Sugar Hill, not just the move being stylistically a move that Jared Anderson wanted, but someone that can help keep Jared Anderson on the straight and narrow. We'll wait and see as to see if that is the case. Before we move on to our next topic, and people are talking about it in the chat, matchmaking for Martin Bakole. Cloud Cafe is calling for Zhang versus Bakole. Bakole brought in through his one and only defeat back into the ring with him, that being Michael Hunter. But Bakole is, he said he welcomed that fight, but he's also kind of saying, look, I want that fight, but I feel like I'm a bit at a different type of level. I kind of want the Joseph Parker's, Cabelle's, kind of the people that are in the Saudi mix so he can keep himself in the Saudi mix. Because right now, Michael Hunter isn't in the Saudi mix. If you could match make for Bakole right now, as people are making in the chat, what one fight would you like to see from Martin next?
I'd like to see Zhang. I think Bakole versus Zhang is a good fight. I'm seeing people in the chat obviously put other fights. Someone's just put Bakole versus Parker, but for me, I think Bakole versus Zhang. There's something about it. Just two man mountain heavyweights going against each other. Both two fighters who clearly possess a lot of power. Um, and I just think it's the perfect fight to make next. Obviously, I like the Parker fight as well, but I think Parker deserves a bigger opportunity than Bakole. I feel like if Bakole versus Parker was to get made, it would be more of the opportunity for Bakole over Parker. And I think Parker's at that stage after these last two wins that he's had, that he deserves a big opportunity. So Zhang versus Bakole, for me, I think that's the perfect fight to make.
Jumping back to the comments. Here we go. Never saw anything in Anderson. It was the easiest money I've made in a long time. Well, I'm glad to hear that you've won your bet. Bet responsibly, of course. I do kind of wonder though as to why the Anderson team decided on Bakole when they had options like Jermaine Franklin, who was also in the pipeline, who was a choice they could have made over having Bakole in the ring with him. And you would have thought maybe there would have been a lot more of an even type of fight there. So whose decision was it, the final decision to make, to choose Bakole over someone like a Franklin? Two good fights for sure, not in the perspective of Jared Anderson now that he's had the Bakole fight. But yeah, I you maybe feel that might be kicking himself that they didn't go for Jermaine Franklin. Thomas Bonin says Bakole dangerous man, fast hands, long reach, decent pop and a strong jab. That would being 208 pounds and seemingly improved gas tank. Although he sparked Makabu all his life, Southpaw doesn't phase him. You don't beat Bakole by standing in front of him, especially when he had a longer reach than you by 4 inches. Cloud Cafe, Bakole's a problem. He throws shots without overextending. Bakole will never be world champion due to his limitations, but he's a tough top 10 guy. What else have we got here? Reminding me how Eastern European boxers fight in amateurs mixed with Mexican style stance. Bakole's too static. There'll only be target practice for Zhang, let alone the elite guys like Usyk and Fury. But they didn't interview Michael Hunter, his former opponent. Michael Hunter said and went as far as to say that Martin Bakole would beat everyone in the heavyweight rankings except Alexander Usyk and accept himself as well in the rematch. So alluding to the fact that movers or people who can, move laterally, move around the ring well, will pose Bakole those problems, and everyone else who's a bit more static, who's a bit more upright, will fall short to Martin Bakole. Whether you think that's the case is another thing. We'll have to wait and see on that. Anderson doesn't have what it takes mentally. We would learn a lot about Bakole. Also, Anthony Joshua would give Bakole hell, just style wise. You have to jab and move against Bakole. Anderson had a horrible game plan. I think I've read that one already. What else have we got here? 50-50 fight. Top Rank had enough of Anderson and made him sink or swim. Can't blame him. Top Rank do make their prospects prove themselves quicker than others. So yeah, to be fair, off the back of Charles Martin, where do you really go? You have to have another step up. Or maybe you would argue there actually that probably Bakole was that right step as well too, or someone of that ilk as well. Also, Franklin would have been too. Agreed, Franklin would have been a much better fight for Anderson. I think his team probably thought Anderson would look good against Franklin, even though I think he'd win comfortably. Bakole has better stamina, and since Bakole's upper body stays up straight, he might negate Bakole's jab. If Bakole fights the first 4 rounds like Madrimov, there'll be a problem on Zhang. Let's park the Bakole chat 2 and Anderson chat 2 for now, although good win for Martin Bakole. I'm very, very intrigued to see where he moves next to. I want to know your thoughts on the next topic, and that being Jarrell Miller in daylight. Miller light. That's what I sort of tried there. Robbery, as people are calling it, against Andy Ruiz. I'll tee this up for you again, Josh. And I was kind of thinking going into this that for me, I thought Andy Ruiz would come out the winner here and possibly have like an emphatic victory on his record against Jarrell Miller, who we know the way Jarrell Miller fights. He's come forward, all action, but leaves holes in his defense, leaves holes in his game for someone who Andy Ruiz on the come up before AJ. His game plan was to fight and punch when you punched and find those holes and find those gaps and look to set up those counter punches to really kind of break you down. And I just felt that if there was that Andy Ruiz still there, that Andy Ruiz of old, that hunger of Andy Ruiz, forgive the puns and things that are obviously, that you can point to with that. But if he had that hunger, he would still find that way to find that finish in him. And it never looked really as to be the case at all in that fight. And Jerome Miller, just big guy, 2 big guys in there, of course, but was bulldozing his way through and having his way against Andy Ruiz, who has to go back to the drawing board now, who is on the end of a draw, but one that many feel and matchmakers will look at that and say that he lost that fight. So we'll be more inclined to give Jarrell the opportunity because he speaks well. And look, you've got to also add into the fact his past, but that doesn't seem for the Saudis and the matchmakers now that seem they've moved past that point. So that conversation about his past is, unless it comes up again, unless he fails a test again, they've moved on. That boat has sailed now. They're going to use Jarrell Miller more because he sells fights and he's of a good style. He might be the next kind of big gatekeeper type of fighter who, unless he can fashion himself an opportunity by keep winning, he will still fall short to the big guys like a Dubois who's on the way to going for world titles and has won a world championship now, as proven with capturing that IBF world title, albeit unfortunately for him outside of the ring. But he might be that gatekeeper type of fighter that's used when the likes of Derek Chisora are coming towards the end of their career. Miller will still get those opportunities, but Andy Ruiz has kind of left himself kind of clawing at the ladder still to keep on and keep himself in the Saudi contention there. Josh, what did you see of the fight? And do you feel that it was a robbery like people were saying? Do you feel that Jarrell Miller should have won more conclusively than the draw that he was given?
Yeah, I thought Jarrell Miller won that fight. I'd say 8 rounds to 4 at the closest. Going into the fight, I was backing Jarrell Miller the whole way, if I'm being truly honest, just seeing the way that he dropped a lot of weight. But not even looking at Miller himself, but just looking at Andrew Ruiz. And we know since he won the world titles off AJ, he's not been as hungry. He said it himself. He was enjoying himself too much outside the ring. And since then, since the 2 performances that he has had since coming back after the AJ defeat in the rematch, it's just not sold me. And then just the constant periods of inactivity, 2 years out of the ring. And for Jarrell Miller, he was coming into this fight off the back of his first career defeat, where I watched interviews of him saying how much it affected him, saying that he was really, really good about it. I just thought it's Jarrell Miller's time. I thought Jarrell Miller's going to get a statement win, and he's going to really put himself into that mix as a household name in terms of what Turki Al Sheikh looks for when putting on a card. Turki likes his fighters who are entertaining both in and out the ring, and Jarrell Miller fits that for me. So I still think Jarrell will get the opportunities. I don't think he'll fall short of any opportunities. But for Andy Ruiz, I don't really know where he goes from here, because I think one of the only reasons why he has been sticking around is because of these Saudi fight nights where he's going to get paid a lot. We've seen how much money he was asking for when the fights with Fury were popping up at Wembley, and Andy Ruiz was a contender for the fight. But apparently, the money he was asking for was just ridiculous amounts. And I think after that performance, I don't see him deserving a big payday. If I'm being truly honest, I think it is, like you said, back to the drawing board. But who do you put Andy Ruiz in there with next to get him back into that contention? What fighters out there do you look for? Maybe if they want to keep throwing Jared Anderson into these big fights, what if they do the loser versus the supposed loser, Jared Anderson versus Andy Ruiz? That's just a spontaneous fight that's come up in my head now. But I just don't see a lot of options for Andy Ruiz after that. I don't think he's done himself any favours. That was his big opportunity to get himself back in the mix and try and push himself to world title contention where he once was. And I just don't see him getting back to that level after that draw with Jarrell Miller, if I'm being honest.
Okay, let's play with that as well too, Josh. I'm going to give you a list of names. Tell me which one you feel Andy Ruiz has the best chance of beating, or it does indeed beat. Let's go with Fabio Wardley, Otto Wallin, Moses Italma, Jermaine Franklin, and Philip Hrgovic.
So what am I saying? Which out of those 5 names, how many of them can he beat?
Yeah.
Right. So Fabio Wardley. I don't know, because I still feel it's too soon to be putting Fabio Wardley in those fights. But Fabio Wardley is looking very. I don't know. You're giving me some tough fights here, Ayman. You've given me some tough ones to call. Fabio, I think I'm going to say Fabio Wardley beats him. I feel like Fabio might just be that too big vertically for him. I think obviously size-wise, I know Ruiz is the bigger man, but I think the stamina and the speed of Fabio Wardley will be too much. But then again, we also know how fast Andy Ruiz's hands are despite his size. Otto Wallin, I think Otto Wallin beats him. I think that's a bit of an easier one to call.
Okay.
Most of the time, I think that's the hardest one you've thrown at me because we know how good most of the time is. But Andy Ruiz is, before the fight anyway, fringe world level fighter. I think so. I think Moses Itama has it all for me. I know it's a very controversial take, and I might get absolutely flamed in this chat for saying that. But I think Moses Itama does beat him. And then who were the other 2 names?
Hrgovic and Franklin.
Hrgovic, yes. I think Hrgovic beats him. I think Hrgovic, while he's not looked as exciting as of late and obviously coming into it off a defeat, I still think he beats Andy Ruiz. And I'm only going off if we see the Andy Ruiz that we saw at the weekend. That's what I'm going off. I'm going, a lot of people say you're only as good as your latest performance. His latest performance wasn't very good. And then Jermaine Franklin. Yeah, I think Jermaine Franklin just beats him. But I think out of all of them, I think the closest fights are either Wardley Ruiz or Franklin Ruiz. I think those 2 are the closest for me.
And sticking on Miller as we look to close out the show there, Jarrell Miller earns himself a draw for sure, but he's the one that comes out with the most credit. We're talking about him getting robbed there, earns himself, I guess, another opportunity over in Saudi Arabia off of the back of tough fight against Daniel Dubois, but maybe sliding doors moment where he seemed like he was in the ascendancy and Daniel Dubois was able to find a lot more within himself and get the late on finish there. It was a little bit, and I'll allude to it as well too, although the ship has kind of sailed there. There's a little bit tongue-in-cheek and slightly a little bit distasteful too, with Eddie Hearn kind of posing in those photos looking like he's shocked at Jarrell Miller's physique there. Off the back of his history. No fail test, though, from Jarrell, and I'm sure he's learned the error of his ways since there. But he's there over in Saudi. A lot of good options there on the table for him, for Jarrell. Do you think, here's the question I'm going to ask you, though, do you think we'll ever see Jarrell Miller and Anthony Joshua get in the ring?
Hey, man, you're on fire with these tough questions today, You're on fire with these. I'd like to say yes, but based on just the trajectory of the fighters, I don't think so. AJ's on the verge of becoming a 3-time heavyweight world champion. We know that he doesn't intend on sticking around for much longer. So I know what a lot of the talk of the plan is. AJ beats Dubois, and then if Fury beats Usyk undisputed, and I think after that, is there anything left for him to do? Not really. It'll be an undisputed fight against Tyson Fury at Wembley Stadium. You'd like to think, but I don't really think it gets any bigger. Like, nothing's bigger than that. But let's say Daniel Dubois rips up the script and beats Anthony Joshua in September. Could we then see the Miller fight? I think it'd be an interesting fight. I think it would definitely be a fight they'd explore because it's a fight you can still sell because of the history between the two. When we've seen it even back when they obviously announced Miller versus Dubois and Joshua versus Otto Wallin. We've seen that there's no love lost between them. We saw them going back and forth with each other at the press conference. They're now in Saudi. I do think that fight it'd be good to happen, but I just think based on what the plans seem to be, I don't think it's going to happen. If I'm being truly honest, no.
Right, let's close out with you guys in the chat there. Ruiz been threatening to get into shape for the last 5 years and never does. He's done to me at the highest level. Any boxer who starts getting his eyebrows chopped like Ruiz also needs to go. Andy was fat before he started smoking weed. He'll never see his feet without the mirror again. Tough words from Thomas Bonin. Miller is very good at selling fights. He'll get a few more big fights. I think that's the way too. I can't blame Andy Ruiz, Hispanic food and women. I think there was an interview. I can't quite place it in my mind, otherwise I'd give it the appropriate credit. But Andy Ruiz has been saying that off of the back of his, Buster Douglas, Mike Tyson type of victory against Anthony Joshua and the money and the payday that came his way off the first and second fights, he started getting cousins that came out of the woodwork and people and family members that he never even knew who were asking for handouts and asking for a favor or two off the back of his successes. And I think that really kind of took its toll on Andy, who also partied away a lot of that from some of the videos and has since also learned the errors of his ways. Cloud Cafe has given his pound-for-pound list, starting off at 7, Benavidez, 6 shared by Tank and Shakur, 5 shared by Bivol and Beterbiev, 4 is Jesse Bam Rodriguez, 3 Inouye, 2 Crawford, number 1 Alexander Usyk. What else have we got here? Miller got robbed, but that was always going to happen in LA. Wouldn't mind seeing Miller again. He's fun. Miller versus Chisora or White. I only think that being fat is an advantage in heavyweight because it protects your body. Also, the reason why you gain fat around your belly protects you, just like your beard and hair still grow to protect your neck. I hope Anderson comes back huge. I heard Dubois gave Anthony Joshua problems in sparring. Great turnout in my beautiful Los Angeles. Jerry, good to see you in here. But I think Dubois is not a 12-round fighter mentally. Cloud Cafe asking to be hired. Hire me, seconds out. Send your CV in to Danny Flexen. I'm sure he's happy to read that on a day off or two. And who knows, maybe you will be on the next episode of Seconds Out Live. We always kind of flirted with the idea of getting guests on every now and again. So if your discourse is good enough and you're willing to contribute to the debate, maybe we will have you on Seconds Out. As you can see as well, Josh Hart kind of won the competition to be on Seconds Out Live this week. So we'll have anyone on board. Seconds Out Live. I'm joking.
I see how it is, Ayman.
I'm joking. Josh has thoroughly deserved his position. But we will close out this episode of Seconds Out Live. Once again, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining in and contributing in the chat. Every week we are live to chew up the fat in the boxing world. Bit of a lighter weekend this week with no fights happening here domestically. I believe there's one Misfits card happening over as well too. I think is it Virgil Ortiz versus Bochik? Is that this weekend as well, Josh? Or am I getting my?
I think so. I think it is. Yeah. And you also got Luis Alberto Lopez as well. I think.
Yeah, that's right. But otherwise, domestically, nothing going on for a bit. I think Denzel Bentley's out in action in a couple of weeks as we look forward to the 31st of August. A couple of promoters were looking to maybe decide to go on the 31st. And it was going to be Catchall versus Progress as well on the week before that. But they decided not to in the wake of KSI fighting. They were scared off by the Misfits show. Who would have thought that in these years? But leaner weeks, but glad to see you guys all in here contributing to the chat. As is customary, though, we will leave the last few words to the co-host, that being Josh Hart. So, Josh, you've got the podium. You've got the mic. You've been abused in the chat for the whole hour. You've been abused by me with a couple of jokes here and there on the end of it. How would you like to leave off this episode?
Do you know what? I think out of the lives I've done so far, I think I probably took less abuse in this one than any of the others. So I'd like to thank the chat for not ripping into me as much. You know, I'll be able to sleep a lot easier tonight now. But no, everyone, thank you for tuning in as always. I'm sure it probably got said last week. Obviously, thank you for 800,000 subscribers. We're going to keep pushing, keep getting content out. I'm not even going to say on the road to 900k. We're on the road to 1 million. So thank you all as always. Thank you for tuning in again this week. And I might not be back on Seconds Out Live next week, but I know Danny Flexer and Ayman Khan will be. So I'm sure they'll both see you all then.
Whoa, Vinny, don't close this out just yet. I have realized the error of my ways because I've not even closed the poll here, Josh. What am I doing here? Well,
That means that you've just given me the final word. That's not even going to be the final word now, is it?
the ship is sinking without Danny flexing clearly. Let's close the poll, Vinny, and you can read out the results, Josh, here with the final word on Canelo's move. So if we can get the poll
Terence
closed.
Crawford's move, actually, not Canelo's move.
Terence Crawford's move. Yeah, see, the ship is really sinking here.
So the winner with 60% is people saying that they want him to stay at 154. 17% have said back down to 147. 12% have said 168, and 9% have said 160. So the general consensus seems to be just to stick where he is, which I think backs up my point I made earlier about people have lost interest in Canelo versus Crawford. I think the results of the poll show that perfectly.